all over to you, His Grace Mahatma Prabhu. Please welcome him with a huge round of the virtual reverberating applause.
Hare
Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. It's nice to be here with you. I want to apologize because this weekend I'm in Dallas and I was trying to get away so I could attend this and listen to everybody, and just one thing after another after another. And all I can say is I'm lucky I'm here right now. I was even worried about that. It was just so busy. So I don't like to be a speaker at a conference or workshop that I'm not participating in, so I feel a little bad about that, but I was there in spirit. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Shamini Tinamane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvise Sasunivari Paschatya Satarine Panchakalpaturubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhye Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So I'm just scrolling through to see all your lotus faces, to see who's here, because I have a small screen and everything doesn't come up at one time. And seeing some of my old friends and new faces. And I hope I don't see any of my enemies. Only kidding. Hare Krishna. So, okay. So, you ever heard the story about the boy who wanted to get married? A young man told his father, I want to get married. And his father said, okay, say I'm sorry. And he said, why should I say I'm sorry? He said, no, just say you're sorry. He said, but why? I didn't do anything wrong. No, just say you're sorry. But I didn't do anything wrong. Why do I have to say I'm sorry? Just say you're sorry. Why? Just say, okay, I'm sorry. Now you can get married. If you don't know how to say I'm sorry, don't get married. You agree with that? Partha, you agree? I have to get Partha's approval for this. Yeah. And sometimes as men, we have this crazy conception of what it means to be a man. One of our God brothers imitated the concept of a real man. I'm a brahmachari. I eat wood for breakfast. You know, that's the concept. I'm a man. I don't take nothing from nobody. So, you know how difficult it is to say I'm sorry, don't you? You know how difficult it is to admit that I've done something wrong? It's very difficult sometimes, isn't it? So when we were picking a topic, I wanted to pick a topic but I wanted to point out how it's that these topics like being humble and forgiving and being able to say I'm sorry take tremendous strength, incredible strength. And a lot of men sometimes think, no, I'm the man, I'm not going to say I'm sorry, or why should I forgive, you're wrong. And that then becomes a strength. It's not actually a strength. If you analyze it philosophically, it's actually mostly tamagun. You know, anger, resentment, trying to control the situation. It's very tamasic. It's not really spiritual, so sometimes we misunderstand. So we thought, because I teach forgiveness, why don't we kind of pull that into the hero's journey, but how it's an heroic act to forgive. And it's as it said, forgiveness is to forgive is divine. So I'll tell you a little bit about my story, what I've come to understand, and how forgiveness has helped me become stronger. So in 1986, one of the leaders of our movement, who I was working closely with for many, many years, left, but he left in a strange way. He was a guru and GBC and a sannyasi. And we didn't know he was leaving. He left his responsibilities. And when he left, the temple that I wasn't the president, but I was one of the leaders there. That temple, kind of, the visual is the Twin Towers, just, you know, that picture in everyone's mind, the Twin Towers looks like dynamite, and some people say it was. Anyway, that's for another mantra retreat. So, and it just, it fell down, just, you remember that picture? Well, that's the visual of the temple after he left. It just kind of looked like Twin Towers just collapsing. And the interesting thing about how he left was he didn't tell anybody he was leaving. And you know how we found out that he had left? He had written a letter to his disciples. That's how we found out. We didn't know. And we read the letter that I'm incapable of maintaining my position as your spiritual master and as the GBC, et cetera, et cetera. So I felt like this person has broken my trust on the deepest possible level. And if he would have told us, we could have worked something out. Maybe helped him or maybe made a transition. So I was reeling with resentment. That resentment lasted for 18 years. And at that time, 1986, I was 36. I've been a devotee for 16 years. And I'm proud to say, probably, I never missed a Mangal Artik or 16 rounds in those 16 years. So I was what you would call a good devotee. And this good devotee is reeling in resentment. So that's a paradox, isn't it? And whenever we do forgiveness workshops, I always ask everybody, do you believe in karma? Everyone says yes, because they're devotees. I said, then what are you doing here? You know, this person's just bringing your karma. You know, we have these contradictions. So it was a real wake-up call for me to see that even though I'm pretty strict, I'm still now feeling deep resentment for this person. So 18 years after this happened, a devotee said, you know, there's this workshop you can go for free. It's really good. Why don't you go? And I respected the devotee, and I went there, and they had a forgiveness exercise. They just said, you know, you don't need to hold on to this. Just let it go. You know, why would you want to hold on to it? It's not helping you. And so 18 years later, I said, yeah, probably I should let it go. It's of no use to me. So in that workshop, I let it go and actually felt like this huge burden was lifted from me. And there was a big shift in my consciousness. And I realized that this resentment it actually was draining my energy. Because to hold on, you actually have to put energy to hold on to resentment. I don't know if you're aware of this, but it takes energy to hold on to it. And a lot of people that have written books on this topic, they say things, I'm paraphrasing, like, the energy that you're using to hold on to resentment could be better used for other things. And then I read a study in which they found that resentment is a subtle form of stress because you're not even conscious of what's going on the subtle level, but it's a constant form of stress. And they found that there's a correlation between weakening of the immune system and the stress that resentment is causing. So anyway, I studied these things, and subsequently I studied these things, but the main thing was my experience was something was lifted. But and then after that happened, I thought, this is much more important than I ever thought, than I ever understood. And I think I should teach this to devotees and non-devotees as well. We can use it as a bridge to Krishna consciousness. So they say, I don't know if you know this, they say, if you read 5 books, you're an expert. And if you read books on the topic for 5 years, you're a world expert, because nobody reads 5 books on one topic. So I read 5 books on forgiveness. I had my own experience, but the real experience came when I started teaching it. And I was teaching it quite regularly. And the experience came mostly from the students and their experience, and then my effort to teach it. And then one time, I got to teach it with Arch in the City. We did it on online course together. And Arch in the City said something that hit me kind of like a bomb. And she said, this was her definition of forgiveness. She said, forgiveness means to take responsibility for how you feel. To take responsibility for how you feel. And I thought, that's a brilliant definition. I feel a certain way. Okay, that's how I feel. According to my state of consciousness, I will react to situations in a particular way. And I will respond, I will react, I will feel a certain way. And she's saying, despite how you feel, take control of how you act. I said, wow, that's really interesting. And as time progressed, I realized that so often there was no barrier between how I felt and what I said, how I felt and how I acted, which is basically a definition of emotional immaturity when you really look at it. Because emotional immaturity means not only to be aware of your emotions, but to be able to handle them so you don't act in ways in which you will regret. And we've all done that, right? I wish I hadn't said that. I wish I hadn't done that. So I thought, okay, this is interesting because I was seeing in my life how often I was unable to control my words when I felt a certain way, when I was upset. Can you relate to that? I mean, think how many times your feelings and your actions are aligned when you don't want them to be. A lot, isn't it? And so then I went to Bhagavad Gita and I said, wait a minute. Isn't this Bhagavad Gita? Isn't this Arjuna's situation? Arjuna is saying, Krishna, I don't feel like fighting. And Krishna is saying, don't act on how you feel, act on Dharma, act on what is best. That's right. Not that Krishna's not saying, don't feel. And Arjuna Siddhi said, you never are going to deny your feelings, but you're going to take responsibility so you don't act against your own integrity. You don't act against your own values. Have you ever acted against your own values? How does that feel? It doesn't feel like chit. It feels like something that sounds like chit, right? Yes? So now I'm looking at Bhagavad Gita in this context, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, this is actually what's going on between Krishna and Arjuna. And Arjuna's the ultimate hero who's become the ultimate victim, basically. The ultimate hero has become the ultimate coward because he's telling Krishna, basically, like if, sometimes children, I don't feel like doing that. And that's basically what Arjuna is doing, isn't it? And then you have this verse later in Bhagavad Gita where Krishna talks about whimsical action. You know that verse? Yashastra vidim utsrija. You give up Shastra to act whimsically. So what does whimsy mean? It means you act according to how you feel. That's how I feel. You're wrong, Prabhu. And I'm going to make you understand you're wrong. And that's how I feel. And that's what I'm going to do. No, you should understand what I'm saying. I don't want to understand what you're saying because you're wrong. You ever done that? You don't have to admit it because I already know the answer. So we all do it. So then I started looking at my own life and I was realizing that sometimes I act like a kid. Have you ever acted like a kid? You grown men? So I was at a devotee's house and I was staying in his guest room and he had a book which was the sequel to The Road Less Traveled. I opened the book, I read one paragraph, and the paragraph said, most people do not mature beyond the age of 8, between 8 and 11. If they don't work on their emotional maturity, they will stay at the maturity level of an 8 to 11-year-old. Gentlemen, if you want to get married, you got to be more mature than an 11-year-old, because women tend to mature faster and you have to catch up. But have you ever seen a fight between adults and you're thinking they're acting just like kids? Have you ever thought like that? Now you know why. Because a lot of us do not mature beyond the age of 8. So I was becoming aware of this in my own life. And I had another realization, which was kind of important. And I think this is a hero's realization. It was a realization of cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance means you're not even aware of what you're doing. So I started becoming aware that often I was giving into my emotion, and there was no point where I could kind of break, neutralize my emotion, and then work and act through my intelligence, act according to my values, according to my integrity. I started to become aware that part of the problem is I didn't realize that I was doing this. And the reason I didn't realize I was doing this is because my self-identity was that I don't do this. So let me explain. If you have a self-identity, no, I'm a good devotee. I go to Mangalarti every day and chant 16 rounds. So I am in control of my life, my mind, my senses. If you think like that, then when you're actually not in control of your emotions, you don't even notice it. And you could rationalize, no, I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do. Prabhupada said this, and I'm doing this. When in actuality, you're acting in an emotionally immature way. So cognitive dissonance means something like a self-identity determines in your own consciousness how everything you do is evaluated. So if you identify yourself as I am a good person, or I am a good devotee, or I am a controlled person, or I am a nice person, then it doesn't matter what you do, because you will always think what you do is good or nice or pure or whatever. Can you relate to that? It's really interesting. It's called cognitive dissonance. So I realized I had a severe case of cognitive dissonance, and that it took tremendous strength. The hero. How much strength does it take to admit there's something wrong with yourself? It takes a lot. To admit that I'm actually not always the person that I think I am. I'm actually acting out of integrity. And it to me, at least in my experience, it took some deflating of the false ego to be able to recognize that. Because when the false ego is inflated, it's really hard to see that. It's really hard to see myself. So I began this kind of journey throughout my life, not just with forgiveness, but with emotions in general, in this process of being very self-aware of when I get upset, the tendency to do something or say something which I don't really want to say, I don't really want to be. So then I developed a strategy, and I think you'll like this strategy. It's proven extremely helpful for me. And it looks something like this. And I'm going to ask you a question, and this will help you. And this is an interesting question. Have you know that self that you have that you hate? You know, you ever acted in a certain way, that certain self comes up and then you act that way and you hate yourself for acting that way? You know that self? Are you familiar with that? I saw this interview with Mike Tyson. And so they were saying, asking him in the ring, you're ferocious, this and that, you're amazing. He said, that person in the ring, I hate that person. I don't want to be that person. That's the person I have to be to win the fight, but I hate that person. So who is the person that you sometimes become that you hate? Think about that person. We all know who that is, right? The person we don't want to become. And there was a movie in which this boxer wanted to fight the world champion, and his coach didn't think he could beat him. Not because he didn't have the skills, but there was something inside of him where he saw there was a doubt. And his coach said, "Don't fight him. I'm not going to book this fight." And he was begging him to fight. And so finally the coach said, they were in a room with mirrors. He said, "I don't know, spar with yourself in the mirror," or whatever you call it. So he's sparring in the mirror with himself. And the coach says, "You see that man in the mirror?" He said, "The heavyweight champion is not the person you have to defeat. It's the man in the mirror. That's the person you have to defeat." I said, "Wow, I like that. That's powerful." That hit me very deeply because I realized that's true, that every obstacle I have on my path is me. And in fact, when Prabhupada was asked what is the greatest obstacle, he said, "You yourself are the greatest obstacle." So that person we hate to be is not the person we have to be unless we give in to that. So so you all know that person you don't want to be because that person visits you often. How do you deal with that? Well, there are many ways, but I wanted to offer one that I found extremely valuable. Number one, you visualize the person you want to be. Like, if I could be any way, how would that be? So now you've done the hero's journey. So you have an idea now. Okay, if I could, Krishna said, any way you want to be, I will make you. What would that look like? How would you want to be? I think you should write that down. If not now, later, because that vision is very important in helping us become, as Archana Siddhi would say, victors, not victims. You have the vision. What is the hero for me? What is the ideal person that I want to be? What are the qualities I want to possess? What are the things I need to control in my mind, my senses, my heart? That should be very clear. And that should be something that inspires you as much as pizza and ice cream inspires you. Actually, it should inspire you more than that. If you're hungry and I say pizza and ice cream, you're like, yeah, where is it, right? You feel it, isn't it? You need to feel what you want to become even more than pizza and ice cream when you're starving. So then you're saying, okay, it sounds good. How do you do it? I'll give you one way that I've found that works. Think of a devotee that embodies the qualities you want to embody. And whenever you're in a situation where that self that you hate starts to rise and is pushing you to do or say things you will regret, think of that person and ask yourself, what would that person do in this situation? And I can tell you honestly, that has saved me more times than I have fingers, just by thinking of that person. You know, that time when you feel like what was done to me is so bad, it's so wrong. I am so upset. I have to tell people, I have to do something. And you stop and think. Jayananda Prabhu is my go-to because I was fortunate enough to serve with him. And I know exactly what Jayananda would do. And when I'm in those situations, it's 100% clear to me. He would not do what I feel like doing at that point when I'm upset. And it has saved me so many times. So both of these things, having the vision of what you want to be, it will always tend to pull you out of that lower self. And having the person you can meditate on who embodies the vision that you want to follow, you want to be, can be your savior over and over again. So this was my journey with forgiveness, because forgiving can sometimes be extremely difficult because we feel that the person doesn't deserve it. Why should I forgive them? They don't deserve it. Right? You ever feel like that? Why should I forgive you? Look what you did. That's where the strength comes in. Because if we look at, oh, I just read this letter today. This is so beautiful. This is perfect. Prabhupada explained what he meant by your ever well wisher. And he said, I am your ever well wisher because no matter what you do or where you go, I will always be there to help you. I will always be praying for you. You leave me, you forget me, you turn against me. I will always be there for you. Interesting, isn't it? There is no question of resentment. Why would I accept you? You left me. You broke your vows. Don't come back. I don't want to see you. That's not Vaishnavism. And then, they say hate the sin, not the sinner. What about this? Hate the sin and love the sinner. Take it up one level. How difficult is that? As Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, we should only desire the greatest good for our worst enemy. How difficult is that? That's where the real strength is. And the male strength is, the macho tamagun strength is beat people down, isn't it? And the Vaishnava strength is bring people up, even the enemy. So this was all coming up in the forgiveness workshop. And so it was becoming more and more evident that you needed strength. You needed tremendous strength to be able to forgive someone. And so we did an exercise in the workshop. And we asked devotees, pretend that you are Krishna. And Krishna, he knows what happened. And describe the story of your abuse from his position. And it was like completely different than how we were feeling. There was no anger there. There was no resentment. There was no rationalization. There was no fault finding, no excuse. Krishna describes the whole thing, how I put you through this situation to teach you a lesson. I want to help. I want to tell you the lesson I learned. It was a beautiful lesson. And I think maybe this will help us kind of bring all of what I'm talking about together. So when this devotee left, I saw the letter and I felt like I've been betrayed. This person has betrayed me. We work so closely together. We built up this temple together, and he just walked out on me. It's like in marriage. Since I don't want you anymore, or I've left with the kids. Goodbye, good riddance, like that. Just almost, it was almost intolerable for me. And then subsequently, all the pain and suffering I had to go through to maintain the temple because it was falling apart because of him. So it was just salt on the wound. So it was really, really bad. I'm going to feel. And so when we did this exercise where Krishna spoke, I'll tell you what Krishna said to me. Krishna said, Mahatma, you lack compassion, because it was all about you and how you were hurt and how you felt betrayed and you, what he did to you. And this poor person who was, became a guru when he was like 27 and a sannyasi when he was 26, like, don't you understand how difficult it was for him? Wow, that was amazing. Because I was willing at that point to own up to my resentment and to see it as a weakness, not as something that this person deserved. And that was like huge for me to realize that Krishna is telling me, I was trying to teach you compassion and you didn't get it. It was just you were upset, you were betrayed, you were angry, you were mad. So what kind of man is that? What kind of hero is that? Somebody just does a little something and you get upset. You know that joke? You ever heard this joke? the yoga session is over, and they're chanting Om, and everyone's very peaceful. And then this guy comes out, and he finds that his shoes are missing. And he writes this, whoever that idiot was who stole that brainless idiot who stole my shoes, you don't give them back, I'll beat your head in. And then signed Om Shanti, Namaste. And, of course, that's just a joke, but it shows the hypocrisy of religion. But there is a true one, which is so sad and funny at the same time. This is the Sisters of Mercy. This is true story. There is a sign on the Sisters of Mercy convent, and it says, no trespassing. Trespassers will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Signed, Sisters of Mercy. Hare Krishna. So that embodies this spiritual paradox that, like I was saying before, you don't even see the own hypocrisy in your life. So that was my experience. And if you have anyone to forgive, I would recommend that you do it like yesterday, and you will have so many realizations that come from it as a byproduct, much more than just giving up the resentment for that person. You will realize, I think, like I did, that it's a whole paradigm of emotional immaturity, of not being able to process emotions in a way in which I can stay with the integrity of my beliefs. I can stay within the integrity of Bhagavad Gita, that I don't just act whimsically or on my feelings, but I act according to what my spiritual master wants and what Krishna wants. So that's basically what I wanted to say, and it only took 30 minutes. So, I mean, I could say more, but I'd really like to stop now and see if anyone has any questions or comments. Should I just go to the chat, or does someone want to go to it and read it and tell me what I should read, what I should answer?
I'll be here to assist you, Prabhuji. I can do that definitely. So
Okay.
I can read out the questions, and meanwhile I go through that. If you have any questions, if the audience members have any questions, then they can, go ahead and raise their hands, and we would be able to take the question. So we do have a question by Ram Kishore Prabhu, but I will take that. But when, Prabhuji, while the discussion was going on, there was a thought that came to my mind. Sometimes when, and I'm talking about a devotional setup, I'm talking about a different devotee, and I'm talking in terms of that maybe my interaction with another devotee. So both of the devotees are trying to serve Krishna, they're trying to serve Guru, but the other devotee, and if we see that somebody has done really a bad act and we are not able to forgive because somehow by Guru, Sadhu, Shastra, we know that act is not something which is to be, which cannot be really forgotten or forgiven. How do we really see that in that aspect?
Let me tell you a story first, maybe, and then you can tell me if it answers your question. This is a story by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, or about Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, which is, I think, is one of the most amazing stories, at least I've ever heard. So let's see what you think. So there was a senior brahmachari in the mat who was not chanting any rounds at all. And they came to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta and they reported that to him. So he asked, is he doing service? And they said, yes, he's engaged all day in service. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, that's amazing, because if I didn't chant my rounds, I couldn't be engaged in service all day. I would be, overcome by Maya. This devotee, he's amazing. He has so much more devotion than I have, because even though he's not chanting, he's still engaged all day. He's got like a reservoir of devotion. He doesn't even have to chant. But why was he saying that? Because he wanted to set that example of seeing the good and appreciating others, because we know how damaging it is to fault and criticize a devotee. Okay, so that's one answer. I'm going to answer this also with another story, and this is a beautiful, maybe two stories. A teacher asks her students, they're young students, maybe like 10, 11. I want you to write the name of every person you hate, one name on one potato, and bring the potatoes back to school. So, I hate Jim, I hate Joe, I hate Chuck, and you bring your potatoes. So each potato has their name. And then she said, so what I want you to do with this bag of potatoes is I want you to carry it with you for the rest of the week. So I guess they brought the potatoes on Tuesday. And you have to keep the potatoes with you when you sleep, when you shower, when you eat, always. And so, of course, they didn't like that. And, it's just becoming more and more of a burden. If you've showered with your potatoes and they got wet, they might start smelling. And if you hate a lot of people, you got a heavy bag to carry around. And you've got to play sports with that bag, eat with it, sleep with it. And she said, yeah, you have to do all of that. You won't get the lesson if you don't do that. So they reluctantly did it. And so they came back and they put their bags down. And they said, she said, well, how did you feel, during the week? It was, oh, it was horrible. It was so heavy, such a burden. It was stinky. I said, well, I just wanted to drop it. And she said, that's exactly what it's like when you carry around hatred. It's the same thing. So if you don't forgive, you're hating this person, you're carrying that around, that toxicity. So what we did in our forgiveness workshop is we asked everyone to allow themselves to feel their resentment. Just like go into it and feel it. What does it feel like? So some people said, to me, it feels like I'm taking knives and I'm stabbing myself. I'm like stabbing them, but I have to go back to stab them, and I stab myself. So the knife's on both ends. Ah, ah. So I'm stabbing myself. Some person said, like, weights on my shoulders, chain on my neck, all these emotions were coming out. And then I asked them, I said, did you actually know you felt that way? And everybody said, no, I didn't know that. So when you actually realize what it feels like to carry hatred in your heart, you don't want to carry it. And the other thing is, if you care for yourself, if you actually have self-compassion, there's no way you want to carry anger within you, even if they deserve your anger, even if you think they deserve your resentment. But when you realize how degrading it is and damaging it is, out of self-preservation and self-love, you're not going to carry it. You want more stories?
No, I
Okay,
think that's a beautiful story that you just mentioned, and very categorically, Badar Prabhu has also put in the chat section the picture of a potato, and whenever I eat a potato, I'm going to remember that.
Okay,
So
can I tell one more story?
yes, please go ahead.
This story, we all know this story, but this story underscores the original point I made of acting with integrity. And this also answers your question, because if your integrity is to be forgiving or compassionate or understanding or whatever, then even though someone's upsetting you, your reaction is going to be with your integrity of understanding. Why is he mad? The story I was thinking of was the yogi and the scorpion, and when he was asked, why did you keep picking up the scorpion even though the scorpion was biting you? He kept picking it up, trying to get it out of the water. And he said, because I'm a sadhu, and sadhus are compassionate. And I thought, well, the scorpion, he's biting me and I'm trying to help him because that's what scorpions do. That's their nature. And he said, well, I'm compassionate. So if the scorpion won't give up his nature, even though I'm compassionate, why should I give up my nature even though he's biting me? So that's such a beautiful lesson. And I want to tell, it's a lesson of integrity. Well, like people are biting me, but my integrity is to be kind. So I don't react according to how I feel, but I act according to my integrity. But there's another story which will help you also. And this was with a godbrother in Mayapur, and he was complaining about this and complaining about that and complaining about this and complaining about that. And there was another devotee who was talking to me, and he was listening to this devotee complain, and he didn't know what to think. And he just left because he felt it was very blasphemous. But I actually saw something different. I saw this devotee was actually crying. Because a lot of times when we complain, we're actually crying we're crying out for help, we're crying out for attention, we're trying to appease our pain. So I heard that, so it didn't upset me. It actually made me feel sorry for him. But if you didn't understand that, you would think, this is offensive, Prabhu. You can't say that about so and so. But I didn't feel that way because I felt he was crying. So sometimes we need to understand that. And then the last thing I would say is we need to understand people's intentions, because sometimes people do the wrong thing, but their intention is good. It's just they don't even know they're doing it, or it's just what they do. It's how they're conditioned. It's how they were trained, but it's not their intention to hurt. So those are some answers. I
Well,
hope that
beautifully
helps.
shared about the lessons of integrity and the lessons of intention. Thank you so much. And while you were mentioning that, I could recall, I think I heard in one of the Bhagavatam sessions out there that once Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj said, I mean, I might be wrong there, but that if you see a white chadar, which is a white sheet, which is impeccable, spotless, and there is just that one little spot of the black kind of stuff, all your
Right.
attention goes towards that, and that is
Yes.
how we go towards the
Yes.
fault
Yes.
finding proclivities
Yes.
that we have.
Yeah. Yeah. You want to do a little exercise? Well,
uh
you kind of gave it away, but here's the exercise. We've done this many times. Can you see this? Yeah, you can see that. So I ask everybody, what do you see? And everybody says, I see a black dot. There's a big white page there, but I see the black dot. So what do I see when I see so-and-so Prabhu? I see his black dot, right? So here's some wisdom that when you see the black dot, it's not about the black dot. It's about you seeing a black dot. The black dot is not the problem. The problem is you see the black dot. So when we find fault, the problem is not the fault of the person. The problem is that we're finding the fault. That's how we need to see it.
Mhm.
So that's something to reflect on as well.
Perfect. I have a few questions. Initially, Ramakishore Prabhu wanted to ask a question. Now,
Okay.
do you still want to ask a question, Ramakishore Prabhu?
Oh, I know, Prabhu. He answered it with one of the stories. Thank you.
Oh, perfect.
Haribol.
Hi, Krishna. And Navkishore Prabhu wants to ask a question.
Okay.
Hare Krishna, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I put the phone here. Thank you very much for talking about this topic. And I think when I thought about an example that was been on my mind is that I had an experience recently in serving with some devotees who I work closely with, where I think my behavior had caused them to feel really upset and taking responsibility for it and really wanting their forgiveness. And I found that the devotees who I was serving with were so upset that they didn't want to talk with me. And
Yes.
and I thought it was strange because it was really painful just to think like they think this way of me, and they're upset with what I've done. And I'm asking, can you forgive me? Like, can you help me move on? And it kind of caused a lot of anger from me towards them. I'm sorry, I'm kind of rambling, but I think to get to the question, really is that I found what really helped me was that I listened to a lecture where, this is, I guess, out of our faith tradition, but this is spiritual principle nonetheless. But a Christian pastor was talking about how Jesus forgave, and that the Christian theology is that you're forgiven if you surrender to Jesus. And something about that lecture helped me to start forgiving myself, and then I found that I was actually able to let go of the anxiety and start to do things that were better than trying to harass these devotees for forgiveness. It was just more of a kind of a calmness and peace that Like, I know what I did wrong. I know what I need to fix. And they may
Yes.
not, want to forgive me, but I still have the power to change my life for the better, even if
Yes.
they never want to see me or talk to me again.
Yes. And
And I guess the question is like, what's a Krishna conscious, parallel or or even if there's not a Krishna conscious direct parallel, like how does that, just a sermon I heard, but how does that reflect in our philosophy or in your study of
self-forgiveness, you're
forgiveness?
asking
Yeah.
self-forgiveness?
And on the same note, we have another question by one of the other devotees also asking that, am I the only one who wants to know more about the self-forgiveness and what it
No.
means?
No, you're not. Self-forgiveness is very interesting because a lot of people, devotees and others, get caught in a loop where they want to forgive themselves, but they don't think that would be right because what they did is so bad. So if they forgive themselves, they feel guilty that they're forgiving themselves. So it just kind of goes in this. I know I should forgive myself, but only a bad person would forgive themselves for doing something that I did that was so bad, and you can't get out of that loop. And that's more of a psychological problem, I think, than a philosophical one, because if we look at it in a very practical way, Mahaprabhu forgives us, the holy name forgives us, and certainly Prabhupada forgives us. Well, let me tell you a story. This is a beautiful story. This will help you. But it just shows how forgiving Prabhupada is. And I always feel like knowing how forgiving Prabhupada is should empower us to forgive ourselves. So there is a devotee. He's not following two or three of the regulative principles. He used to be a sannyasi and Prabhupada's personal servant and cook. But he was coming to the restaurant in Soho. And there was one devotee who would meet that person and talk to them. And that person was not really interested in Krishna consciousness, but he liked taking prasadam there. And so one day, while he's taking prasadam, Srila Prabhupada drives up. And so this devotee says, Prabhupada's here, let's go see him. He's like, I don't want to see Prabhupada, No, let's go. I'm not really a devotee anymore. No, come see Prabhupada. Okay. She drags him out. And then Prabhupada gets out of the car and she says, Prabhupada, your old servant so-and-so is here. And Prabhupada goes right up to him and he says, so you will cook for me? Because he used to cook for Prabhupada. And then there's some devotee says, but Prabhupada, he's taking drugs, he's eating meat, he's having illicit sex. I don't know if he's eating meat, but at least drugs and illicit sex. And I think meat also. And Prabhupada hears that. And he goes up to the devotee again and says, so you will cook for me? And the devotee says, yes, Srila Prabhupada. He melted. So, and we can't forgive ourselves, and Prabhupada is willing to do that. And the whole movement of Mahaprabhu is based on compassion. So I want to rephrase what you said, because you said something really powerful. You said, when I forgave myself, I could let go of the resentment that I was getting from the people who I was not getting them to accept my forgiveness. So many cases, you can't give to others what you don't give to yourself. And so it makes it, you can trap yourself by not forgiving yourself. So this is one of the main things main ways I try to help devotees with self-forgiveness is just look at Mahaprabhu's mercy. And the other thing I think is really important is, Prabhupada, he did care that we would make mistakes, but he cared because it was bad for us, not because he disliked us and wanted us to dislike ourselves. He cared because it was harmful to us and he didn't want to see us suffer. But Prabhupada was unlimitedly forgiving. And the devotees asked Prabhupada, will you forgive us? He said, yes. I will. He said, but don't take advantage because maybe Krishna won't, but I will. So Prabhupada's unlimitedly forgiving. And so I always feel like understanding that is extremely important. And why shouldn't I forgive myself if Prabhupada is willing to forgive me? And the thing that I saw was Prabhupada that he cared most about is your sincerity and your effort. And so to berate yourself if you're sincere and you're trying just because you're weak or you've given in to some temptation, to berate yourself, it's not Prabhupada's mood. It's not what he wants us to do. Of course, he wants us to rectify it. And the other answer to your question, the best form of self-forgiveness is to overcome your difficulty, because then you don't have to forgive yourself, because then there'll be nothing left to forgive, because now you've rectified yourself. So that's also something to consider. Partha, you want to say something? I know you're bursting with wisdom, and you're going to add so much.
I just have a question. You mentioned the toxicity of resentment.
Yes.
It seems like it can become an addiction. Like some individuals can be resentful and bitter for their whole lives.
Yes.
So why is it such an addictive?
I think it becomes
thing?
It becomes an identity. We do an exercise in the workshop where we say, well, what do you get from holding on to resentment? Because otherwise, if you weren't getting anything, you would let it go. And of course, nobody thinks like that. Like, what am I getting from it? And so we went down the list. Yeah, I can be a martyr. Now I have excuses. I have excuses for not being Krishna conscious. After all, how do you expect me to be Krishna conscious? Look what they did to me. I was unfairly treated, What do you expect? So I think some people are looking for excuses. And as strange as it sounds, I think some people, they live their life to be offended. They're always looking for opportunities where they can find someone or something that offended them and something to complain about. And it, as you say, it can be addictive, but the hero will acknowledge it. His false ego will deflate enough where he can acknowledge that, and then he can work on it. And if we're not strong enough to admit it, then basically what's happening is we can't admit our own failure. And so we can use resentment as, excuse to keep us pretending that it couldn't be any different. And that, this statement, anybody who was treated this way would feel the same way. It's not true. Yeah, it's not true. Not everybody would feel the same way. But we use those kinds of beliefs as excuses for failure. Now, there's another really interesting thing which I've studied, is that the comfort zone is so addictive that you'd rather stay in the comfort zone and fail than have to go out of the comfort zone to succeed, because the comfort zone is comfortable. So, let me do this. Is this what you want to do to succeed? No, but I can do it. So there's a little bit of that also, And yeah, it's an unhealthy psychology, that's for sure. And I just think one of the greatest things we can all do is be self-reflective, so we can acknowledge these things, because Partha, you can't, if someone feels that way, it's really difficult to tell them. They have to, at some point, understand themselves through their own introspection and their own willingness to improve themselves, that that's what they're doing, and that they're destroying themselves by running away. That's another thing. We run away from problems. We can't face them. And so that's a good way to run away, or to numb the pain, isn't it? We look for ways to numb the pain. That's a good one. Anger is a pain number. It's better than alcohol, at least you're not breaking the regulative principle. But it's the same thing. You go drink to numb the pain, you get angry to numb the pain. You criticize to numb the pain. Very dysfunctional ways of dealing with pain, And then we go back to that fundamental, as Prabhupada said, the messenger of your karma. Now you're becoming upset with the messenger of your karma. You're a devotee. You believe in karma. How could you be upset with this person? I just want to remind all of you, gentlemen, you did create your karma, in case you forgot. Sometimes we forget that we did create our own karma, because we get mad at our karma. You ever get mad at your karma? not fair. It shouldn't be that way. Well, you can do something better if you don't like that karma. Yeah. So maybe you have something to add to that, but I think anger, and of course, some people have anger issues. It's just they were raised in angry families, and they're just
Yeah.
that's how they process the world, through anger.
I was going to say sometimes it's complicated by especially childhood trauma.
Yeah, exactly. And they need help. And the only way they can process difficulties through anger. And it's unfortunate for them and the people around them. And we see that when you're raised in a family that way, that's just what you do. You copy that behavior. And then a lot of times there was a devotee with me, and she was from South America, and she moved to Taiwan. And she said, I never realized how dysfunctional the families are in our country until I moved to Taiwan, because the people didn't act. They were very gentle there. He said, in our country, it's all yelling and screaming and everybody's angry and upset all the time. And I thought that was normal until I got out of the country. And so sometimes you don't know. He said, that's how you deal with it. Resentment is power. To be resent, don't take that sitting down. Be a man, stand up, get back at them. That's nonsense. That's macho. That's that's not what it means to be a man. What did Krishna do when Radharani, chastised him? Why are you late for our rendezvous? Because I'm sorry. He bows down. And Krishna is the only Purusha, and he's the most humble. Krishna's not, Radharani, you got to listen to me, or I'll beat you up. No, we need to follow his example of the ultimate male. Now, if someone's attacking you, that's a different thing. Then you fight. But, then you use your anger. So anger has a use. It's just we misuse it. Thank you for that question. That helps.
Well, thank you,
You want to say
Prabhuji.
anything else about it? No? Okay. All right.
Badar Prabhu, you had a question and you have been wanting to ask it for a while. Please go ahead.
Yes, just switching from the gallery view. So it's interesting for me to know that you said that you had done your sadhana for 18 years, like clockwork. And it says in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 16, that forgiveness is one of the qualities of the people of divine nature. And we're also taught that just by doing bhakti, we develop all the qualities of the demigod. But it seems from your story that you had to develop forgiveness separately from a workshop. So can you please elaborate on that? And how come, is it that if we're really, really absorbed, do we automatically develop everything, or will it take
And I think this would also, thank you, Badar Prabhu, for the question. This would also take the question of one another participant, Sevanand Chaitanya Prabhu, who has asked, does the strength to forgive and not carry resentment come from japa? So on a similar line, he's asking this question. Analyzing and understanding is one thing, and actually being able to practice seems a mile away. Can you help, Prabhu?
I can speak from experience, because I've done workshops with non-devotees and devotees. And the thing that I realized about devotees is their hearts are much softer because of their sadhana. So it's easier for them to forgive. So, this question is asked all the time. Don't you develop all these good qualities from bhakti, And it's easy to answer and say, like, I smoke, and I thought by chanting japa, help me overcome my smoking. Well, the answer is, are you still smoking? And if the answer is yes, I guess it hasn't. And the question is why? Maybe your japa is not good. Maybe your addiction is deep. But I don't see working on the addiction or working on overcoming the anger or the resentment or working on anything as not a sadhana. And I think that's where you might get messed up. It is a sadhana. So I have a mantra that sadhana, the real sadhana, starts at 9 a.m. because that's when you go out in the world and you practice it all. So, now you have to interact. So now you're going to practice your forgiveness, your tolerance, your patience. At the temple from 4 to 9, there's not any big challenges other than trying to control your mind for japa, but you're not even interacting with anybody. The tough part is interacting. So The real sadhana starts at 9 a.m. when you go out in the world, and that's all the virtues are usually in relationships, aren't they? Patience, kindness, compassion, you know. So, so I came up with a motto: the path to forgiveness is paved with the practice of forgiveness. The path to forgiveness is paved with the practice of forgiveness. And you can change any word you want. The path to humility is paved with the practice of humility. The path to compassion is paved with the practice of compassion. So there's something I learned long ago, and from Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said, if, to Gargamuni, who said, I don't feel like bowing down. And Prabhupada said, well, bow down and you'll feel like it. You know, and we all know that from dancing. You know, shuffling your toes during a kirtan, and devotees are like, come on, come on. And you're like, nah. And, you know, come on, come on. You're like, okay. And then, you know, start dancing. And then you'll feel like dancing. And one devotee was like really depressed in a kirtan because he was trying to do a service, and actually our own lawyers were cheating us. They were working for the opposite side, and he couldn't get his service done, and he didn't know that. And Prabhupada saw that during the artik, he was just sitting down, staring at the floor, depressed. And Prabhupada said, he was trying to get a permit for the Juhu temple. And Prabhupada said, even if you don't get the permit, dance in the artik. So, you know, there's a lot of wisdom about action will change consciousness. So there's this saying, it's easier to act your way into a different state of consciousness than to think your way into a different action. So sometimes it's the only way. You have, you know, okay, Badar, Soma, you have offended me and I hate you. But I'm going to force myself to be nice to you, because by doing that, even if I force myself, I'm going to overcome it. So Prabhupada said, if you're envious of somebody, what do? He said, help them, serve them, support them. It's like, why would I do that if I'm envious? Because by that action, you'll overcome your envy. So I think for me, that's the answer I've come to understand. That, you know, if you have an issue, work on it. It's not independent of bhakti. And your bhakti, all your chanting is going to empower you to be able to do it, isn't it? How are you going to become humble if you're not chanting? But, you know, to understand your own ego, to understand the ways you can become humble, definitely work on it. And think about all the things that Prabhupada teaches about being humble, compassionate. So all I did is in the forgiveness workshop was kind of break it down and put it into a process, because we don't, in our literature, things aren't broken down into processes. So like our japa retreats, they're just breaking down japa into fundamental parts and ways to chant and think. And it's all there in the Shastra, it's just not in one place. So that's my realization. So that's what I did with the forgiveness workshop. Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Thank
you.
Can I put in the, hey, Bud or somebody, you know the address for the Bhakti support site? bhaktisupport.org. If you want to take the forgiveness course, it's at bhaktisupport.org. bhaktisupport.org. And you go on there, and we have 2 forgiveness courses if you're interested. And I spent a lot of time developing this course. I think you'll benefit. I mean, I benefited a lot personally.
I'm definitely going to remember that the real sadhana starts at 9.
Yeah.
And the path to forgiveness, so humility or anything, is why it can be paved by the practice of it. Yeah. So on that note, Jagannath Pandit Prabhu I think Jagannath Pandit Prabhu, do you have a question? You're on mute, Prabhuji. Yeah, now we can hear you.
Yeah. Mahatma Prabhu, thank you so much. I remember years ago we were at a New Vrindavan festival when the tables weren't there. We were sitting on the floor taking prasadam together. And I asked you, when is the book coming out on forgiveness? So I forgive you for not making it yet.
We actually I almost had somebody who was going to make the book of books, the best book on forgiveness, and he disappeared. But we did make, at least we got the workshop, and there's 100 pages of materials in the workshop. So that in itself is a bit of a book. So I'm halfway there, Jagannath. But you can keep bugging me about it. That's
I
okay.
offered my help too. I'd be willing to help.
Yeah, okay. I got one other book I have to write first, Memories of Prabhupada, and then I can think about this. Okay?
Hare Krishna. Thanks.
And Badar is going to bug me also because he's going to help me write it. Okay, thank you.
So Partha Prabhu has a question.
Yes.
Sometimes I think a difficulty in forgiving is understanding the relationship of forgetting and forgiving. Can you speak on that?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people think if I forgive, that means, yeah, like you say, I have to forget, and then the person's going to harm me again. And so why would I forgive? Because I'm not protecting myself. If you actually study forgiveness, you will find there's absolutely no protection in not forgiving. It's just the opposite. You're destroying yourself. But it doesn't mean you don't have boundaries because you forgive. You know, it's like, I mean, we're not Ambarish Maharaj, Yeah, Durvasa tries to kill him, and Ambarish is like, well, whatever, let's have breakfast. You can't expect people to be like that. So, if someone tries to kill you, you're probably like, okay, I'll forgive you, but, we're calling the police and taking care of you. Not because I hate you, just because you're dangerous for me and everybody else. And so and then we have this problem and say, well, that sounds like you're resentful. You called the police. No, I'm just trying to protect myself and create boundaries in my life. Because if I hold on to resentment, it's sitting right here. It's not out there anywhere. I'm the one who suffers. So I'm going to let that go. But practically, I'm going to deal with it as is necessary. And so it's not that you're not Vaishnava. It's your duty to take care of yourself and protect yourself and protect others. Maybe that person needs to be reprimanded to protect others. So, and I think it also depends on, your level of advancement, and everyone has different boundaries. And that's something you have to determine. And, even if someone doesn't resent us, it's not like we want to be so close to everybody. Some devotees we like because we're not close to them, isn't it? I like you, Prabhu. Like, 3 blocks away, great relationship. Closer than that, it's going to go sour. So that's okay, because that way I remain respectful. So it's not offensive. But my realization of this is I don't want to carry resentment in my heart. So I'm going to figure out how I can forgive at the same time, not allow myself to be destroyed by that person. And, sometimes I tell devotees, tell them I forgive you, but I will not, what you did is unacceptable and I will not tolerate it. But I'm not carrying this toxicity in my heart. I don't want to do that. It's not Vaishnava. It's Tamagun. That's what it is. So it's a balance.
There was some research on how very compassionate people are able to be compassionate. And they found that it was because they set boundaries. They have clear boundaries, and that enabled them to be compassionate.
Yeah. Because you always have to protect yourself. That's first. Because if you don't protect yourself, then you end up destroying yourself and you can't help anybody. So I think sometimes devotees think, well, that's selfish or it's wrong. No, self-preservation is, if you're dedicated to helping others, self-preservation is fundamental. And we had a class the other night on self-care, and I asked the devotees, can you tell me all the ways that self-care helps you? And we went for like 45 minutes, and devotees were saying, it helps me chant better japa, it helps better relationships, it helps me forgive, it was amazing what self-care does. You wouldn't imagine it has all these benefits. And so it's really essential. And then you can be of service because you're healthy. And also, I think in our society, being able to forgive is such a beautiful example of what it means to be a Vaishnava. You want to hear something really interesting? There was a devotee, and he was getting counseling from someone. And the counselor said, I think you need forgiveness. Do your scriptures describe forgiveness? And the devotee said, no, they don't. Isn't that interesting? There's nothing in our scripture about forgiveness. And then I found this quote from Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He said that bhakti is made of compassion and humility. And if you mix compassion and humility, it will produce forgiveness. So these are the three ingredients of the kitri of bhakti: compassion, humility, and forgiveness. And he said, compassion, I don't want to see somebody suffer. Humility, I don't want to see anybody suffer on my account because you hurt me, but I don't want to retaliate and have you. So he said, when you put them together, it produces forgiveness. And it's fundamental to bhakti. And I think a lot of us felt like, oh, it's kind of like extracurricular quality. It's not that important, but actually it's fundamental. It's so closely related to humility and compassion and tolerance also. So thank you for that question.
Jagannath Pandit Prabhu is having a huge smile on his face, and he also has a question to ask.
Another one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, Mahatma Prabhu, your last
Yes.
question, your last answer made me think about something you said earlier. You said that it's okay to fight if we're attacked, but I'm assuming that you meant only physically. So if someone is emotionally attacked, how should we respond?
Yeah, that's a good question. Have to be practical, because if you're emotionally attacked, it can destroy you if you're not able to handle it. And I've seen people become destroyed because they were abused. Number one, they didn't know they were abused, or number two, they were told just to tolerate it, and it destroyed them psychologically. So it goes back to self-care. I would not do anything that's going to destroy. I would not recommend anybody doing anything that's destructive. Now, it may not destroy you, but it might destroy me. So you can tolerate it. But I may know if I tolerate it, although I should tolerate it, that would be the best thing. I'm going to be handicapped now. I'm going to have problems to deal with. So, one time Prabhupada said, you have to act according to your realization. So, maybe this devotee can do this, but I can't. And I can't imitate that in the name of I should do it. I know I should, but when I do it, I'm destroyed. And I've seen too many devotees destroyed by abuse. And the most painful thing is they're told to tolerate it because the person telling them doesn't understand this person cannot take this abuse or has been traumatized in their life. And it's just putting salt on the wound. So I think self-preservation is important. And I don't think that's against our philosophy. I think that is our philosophy. And if another devotee is being abused, it's our duty to stop it. Isn't it? To recognize it. Look, sometimes you might be in a situation, you actually see someone's being abused and you don't do anything. Then it's like you're contributing to the abuse. I'm part of a group, and one of the things we are discussing in the group is that a lot of leaders don't understand enough about psychology to understand how to deal with devotees. And sometimes devotees are going through difficult times and they don't know how to deal with it. And they just tolerate, just do your service, Prabhu. And it breaks the person apart. It destroys them. And they can't even stay in ISKCON because they can't live on that standard. So we've been working on some projects where we're going to start educating leaders about these, about trauma and other psychological problems, so they're more sensitive to it, so they don't. Because I am constantly seeing devotees, not constantly, but often seeing devotees being innocently harmed because the person who's giving them the instruction doesn't understand them and what they're going through. And they're put in a situation where they don't defend themselves because they feel it's wrong. And I get them to talk about their feelings, and then they realize they need to protect themselves. Does that answer your question? Oh, thank you. Okay.
Well, on that note, is there any final question that is to be asked?
We got chat. We got millions. Are those just comments or are there questions?
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Dandavad Pranam. I have a question if I can ask. Oh, I saw 2 hands up already. So.
Yeah, go ahead, ask the question. But please, so we have the last few minutes left to for this session. So I would request the participants who want to ask the question to have a very precise question.
Can I read
Prabhu,
something? Can I read something first?
Sure, Prabhu.
Bhakti John says, a therapist once gave me this mantra to repeat over and over. I forgive you, dear one, and I release you, for I have looked into your heart and judged you innocent. It took a lot of repetitions to be able to really feel that. Yeah. I have a beautiful thought. This devotee, we were doing a forgiveness workshop in Denver, and he said, it's not my thought, it's his thought. It's beautiful. He said, if Krishna forgives us, who are we not to forgive someone else? Shouldn't we give to others what Krishna is giving to us? It's like simple spiritual common sense, isn't it? I thought this is so simple, but so beautiful. Okay, so, okay, I turned it over to you. You were going to call on somebody and I interrupted.
Oh, yes, Gopi Krishnan, Prabhu, please go ahead.
So, thank you, Prabhu. So it's not directly about me, but there are 2 devotees in the community. They are senior devotees. They have problems, and at least one of them wants to forgive, forget, and move on. But the other devotee involved doesn't want to come forward. So what is the solution for that kind of situation?
Call ISKCON Resolve. They'll take care of you.
Yeah, that has been all done, but documentedly it says it's resolved, but it's really not resolved.
Yeah,
so.
Because I don't know the situation and I don't know the devotees, but I would definitely recommend, if they're willing, to take a forgiveness workshop, because that can be extremely powerful.
Sure.
And and if they go to my site, you can encourage them.
Sure.
You know, say that I just say Mahatma Prabhu thought it would be helpful for you.
Sure.
And let me know if they do it and what happens. I'd be.
Sure, Prabhu. Yeah. Thank you.
John wants to say something, right?
Yeah, Hare Krishna. I just wanted to share that 40 years ago, when I was an aspiring novice monk in a religious community in a Catholic church, I was looking forward to vows, and I did something just before vows that would have made me choke on the word chastity. And I went to the novice master, and I confessed to him what I did. I thought I would get thrown out, but surprisingly, he forgave me. And I was reminded this weekend during the course of the retreat here that not only did he forgive me, he did not judge me. And when you were talking, Mahatma, about Srila Prabhupada, I remembered him. And the experience of being forgiven is one thing, but the underlying experience of not being judged was really powerful for me in healing.
That's a good self-reflection for all of us. You may forgive, but what about what's going on inside of your heart while you're doing it? I think sometimes we do it because it's right, but we don't do it the right way. Okay, we have 3 minutes. Should we take something from the chat?
Oh, yes, Prabhu, if you want to go ahead and take that. Well, I think we did answer all of the questions out there in the chat, and also we read out the comments. So yeah, on that note, I think everyone's questions been answered and been answered so beautifully. And I seek for forgiveness from all the Vaishnavas if I've not been able to give you any chance to pose your question, but I think we tried a level best so that everyone could ask their questions and we accommodated everyone's queries there. So thank you, Mahatma Prabhu. Yeah.
There's one more question.
Is it?
Do we have
Yeah.
1 minute? Does the strength to forgive and not carry resentment come from japa, analyzing? I guess we did answer that, right?
Yeah, we did answer that.
Analyzing and understanding is one thing. Yeah. Everything comes from japa, but
yeah, we did answer that.
you got to do other things also. Yeah. Okay.
So thank you so much, Mahatma Prabhu, for taking out that time and delivering this forgiveness session for all of us. The heroes definitely need to forgive, and this session would help each one of us in our personal journeys to progress in spiritual life. And I can't thank you enough for delivering this session. Hare Krishna.